hello there. It's the stream of Better Podcasting, episode 298. 298. It's the 298th episode of Better Podcasting, not including bonus episodes or the half episodes or the Better Podcasting live chat or the live chats with SP. None of those. Yeah. I'm so stupid.
I've heard worse.
Oh, let me get on the old social medias. Hi, everybody. It should be live. Two video faces and Steven's audio. SP wasn't talking. You should be able to hear him now. SP, talk.
Two audio faces facing each other.
We
And if
are
you don't
live.
get that reference, you're a lot younger than I am.
I realized, by the way, remember how we were having the problem with the when we would blast it out, the live page, the web.
Yeah.
I don't know that this will make it different, but I realized in one, and I remember doing this, I just don't remember what the problem was. Along the way, I disabled the extra WordPress caching, which the way it usually works is it'll cache the pages to help minimize resources unless you're logged in. So people who are public facing, or like the crawlers of the different things. So I put that on.
creepy crawlers.
I put that on for Better Podcasting and for the Gonna Geek site, hoping that will prevent some of these problems. But we'll see. If it doesn't, I'll look at more updating the plan or something.
Have you tried insecticide?
No.
Have you tried spraying?
I haven't.
Have you tried trapping?
What is trapping?
You put out like ant baits. And
Oh,
you
I
trap.
thought that was like a new dance or something that all the cool kids were doing.
Oh, probably. Rule 34. It's probably something along those lines too. Have to. You know what I am? I'm going to do it. I'm going to go Urban Dictionary. I don't want to, but I'm going to do it. It's because from time to time I say things and I'm like, oh, that's what that.
Did you post on the? Here we go. I'll retweet this.
I posted on the
Join
X.
from the official account. I
No.
retweeted it.
Okay. No, it's from mine. I didn't do it from our official. I also didn't do it from the skies.
I didn't do it from Blue Sky either. Now that Jack's gone, is there anything left?
You know what? I don't think so. I think everybody's going their own ways, whether it's Instagram, Threads, back to X. I think the skies have fallen.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment.
They're monochrome. They are not blue anymore. Jack wished him well. See ya, suckers.
Okay,
Did you do it?
I did, but I think we're getting
Oh,
that.
there it is.
Yeah, I think the live, anyways, it'll come back eventually. Whatever. I think the server's timing out again, so that didn't work. I could be being blocked though on my side actually.
It didn't come back.
Never mind. It's all good.
As long as we're actually streaming.
We are
yeah.
streaming. People will find us. If not, that's fine. Wow, there's more people this time. SP's audio normal. I don't know. Is he? Hi, everybody. Oh, we didn't do it in the... oh, you did it. Come talk with us, please.
Come
Okay.
sail away. Come sail away.
All
come
right.
Sail away.
I'm fully on Threads, but being stuck on Facebook. I haven't been on Facebook in a very long time. I need to get back on there. Maybe get these, because I feel like maybe we get a few people back if I started streaming these religiously to Facebook.
There's nothing religious about our show. It is non-religious.
You don't
specifically.
know that Better Podcasting isn't a religion.
Oh, God help us if we are. It's like Bill and Ted, right? And they come back and there's this whole religion on them, right? In the future.
And if you're good, you will, go where you go when you die. But if you're bad, you will find yourself in the dark realms of the Blue Yeti.
Every once in a while, I will hear a podcast consultant say, yeah, the Blue Yeti, it's not a bad mic. You just need to know how to use it. I'm like, yes, it is a bad mic. If you need to know how to use it. Oh, kitty.
Especially out of today's standards, because there was definitely something to there before when it was like, yeah, you need to know how to use it. But it's really hard to find the use case now where that makes sense for a podcaster. That's
especially when you have the PodMic USB, you have the Shure MV7 USB, whatever, MV7 Plus, I believe. And there's tons, the AT2040 USB, there's tons of good USB microphones.
I'd go as far as to say, if you're using USB like that anyways, and you're like, no, I want myself a condenser because it picks up everything. I think some of the software enhanced ones, like even the Rode
NT1.
That's not the one I was thinking of, but I think that is compatible. I was thinking of the Streamer series. They've got a USB one that has software for it, and then also the Elgato one that has the noise reduction. Like you can go in there and do some software things, right? And I think one of them even works, I think, with NVIDIA. So it's like, I find it really hard to find where that fits in as reasonable advice. So anyways. All right, let's do this. Since Damien is here right now, sorry, Johnny, I don't have a pre-roll for you, but
you don't have a podcast. Gotta have a podcast on the network.
I'm Damien the DM from Adventures in Aurelia, a collaborative storytelling experience told through a game of Dungeons & Dragons, part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other epically geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Before we go, I'll just tell you that because I changed that windscreen a couple weeks ago to the thick one, it doesn't smell like nasty breath. So this is, it's got that good windscreen smell to it right now.
Kind of the plasticky rubber chemical smell to it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not chemicals though, right?
The one that's probably carcinogen.
Yeah, that's what it is. Okay. Go ahead.
Welcome to episode 298 of Better Podcasting. On this show, we continue our podcast media host discussion where we're reviewing Patreon.
But first, in this week's Better Podnerings, topics include some interesting information we found about Isotope RX11. And no, you're not in a rerun. SP has some Rodecaster Pro 2 problems.
And finally, in this week's Better Podback, we discuss Shure's motif and a listener's podcast media host review suggestion.
Lauren, start the show now.
This is Better Podcasting. We are hobby podcasters through and through, just like you. That's why we are different. We minimize the money talk so that you can focus on building a better podcast.
Welcome to episode 298 of Better Podcasting. I'm Steven, and I am pleased to say he is here, luckily on his Rodecaster Pro 2.
Yep, I am here. Fortunately, the storms didn't take me out as they have done in the past on Memorial Day weekend here in the United States. So I'm here, and I am using the Rodecaster Pro 2. It was a close call. We'll have to talk about it in a little bit. Matter of fact, should we just start talking about it now?
I think we get to the Better Podnerings right now.
I'm doing some light podcast preparation over the weekend. It was a long weekend. I was spending time with family. I was doing sort of stuff that I want to get ready to sell the house. So I was doing that. And so Saturday night, I was in the office here and I was using my podcast machine, and I was listening back to some stuff, and I was using the Rodecaster Pro 2 to power my speakers. That's how I power my speakers, or monitors if you prefer. We talked about them before. They're JBL 305 monitors. So I'm listening to stuff, and then it's time to go to bed. I shut everything down. It's storming, so I literally cut the power through my power strip to everything after I shut everything down. Sunday morning, I came into the office after a brunch, and I was in the studio here and trying to power everything up. Computer came up just gloriously. The Rodecaster Pro 2 did not operate, did not turn on.
Well, why were you using the Rodecaster Pro 2 as a surgeon if you said that it didn't operate?
Because I think robot surgeons are better than human surgeons.
Fair enough.
more precise, that sort of thing. Anyway, so Sunday morning it wasn't working, and that led me into kind of a I got to work the problem. I was mad because Rodecaster Pro 2, but I got to work the problem. So I calmed down and I started doing some troubleshooting. I plugged it into another outlet. I used a battery power bank, at which time the screen actually showed up and told me my power bank wasn't powerful enough to power it. So I knew that it was okay, and it just wasn't actually working. So I went around a couple more times just to make sure, and it definitely was the power cord or the power adapter, whatever you want to call it. So I did some research online, try to find a replacement, and I ordered one off of Amazon, but it wasn't going to come in for a couple of days. So I was like, ugh. Unfortunately, I do have an emergency replacement for the Rodecaster Pro 2. We could talk about that in the future, but I was determined. I'm like, I don't want to learn to use the replacement. The emergency replacement. I want to use this because this is the machine that I should be using. So I sent Rode a note, and it was Sunday, a Memorial Day weekend. So I knew I was going to hear from them again until Tuesday, maybe Monday night, but probably Tuesday. So,
but they're an Australian company. Why would they care about Memorial Day? That's an American holiday.
Because I'm assuming I'm emailing the American Service Center, not the Australian Service Center.
Oh, see, I thought that everything to do with Rode was only through Australia.
Okay.
I'm joking.
So, I mean, it was pretty good. I'll admit it. But all right. So then I was driving around. I was actually delivering something that I sold, and I was driving around, and I was on my way back, and I went right by the Best Buy here. I'm like, you know what? If anybody has anything that can work on this, it's going to be Best Buy. And they had something. So what you need is a USB-C adapter. So I got this J5 Create 100 watt supercharger adapter, which Steven is actually holding up the same type in his hand. So we found out that we're buddies for the J5 Create 100 watt supercharger. And I got it home. My concern was that it wasn't going to be in the power range of the Rodecaster Pro 2, because previously we had a discussion on our Discord about the original Rodecaster Pro and the power adapters there. And I got really wigged out about either starving it for power or feeding it too much power. And I was like, But this kind Best Buy employee tried to reason with me and said, look, modern electronics, they will take what power they need, and they won't get too much power, and they won't operate if it's too little power. I'm like, I don't know if I believe you, because we're talking about Rode here. I don't know what Rode does. He's like, well, I used to have a Rodecaster Pro 2. Used to? All of a sudden, my interest peaked up, and he's like, yeah, I traded it in for a Scarlett 2i12 or 12i2, whatever it's called. I'm like, really? He said, yeah, I didn't need all that. I'm just doing some music. I didn't need a Rodecaster Pro 2, so I actually just traded it to another guy for the Scarlett. I was like, okay. And he's like, yeah, it should not have a power. And then I went into the whole thing about my history, and he's like, oh, really? So we'll detail the history of my Rodecaster Pro 2 problems on a future episode. But right now, I'll just say he convinced me to at least try the 100 watt adapter, and I came home. I was like, I'm going to blow this thing up. And it's not going to be under warranty because I used a non-approved Rode adapter. And I started it up and it actually worked. I was like, okay. So I went back to the original adapter, which is in my hand, and it didn't work. I tried it in a different plug. It worked there with the 100-watt charger. It didn't work with this thing that came with the RMA version. Yeah, I'm being calm. I'm okay, Steven. I'm okay.
Calm down, SB.
You don't need an intervention right now. So I did a few troubleshooting steps, determined that it was indeed the adapter that Rode had sent me with the refurbished Rodecaster Pro 2. So they are sending me out a new one. I'm not going to, say anything until I get it, but they are sending me out a new one, and I will swap it out. And I guess I will have an extra adapter in the house for it. But in the meantime, this thing is a piece of...
For the audio listener, he threw it, but unfortunately he was kind of cropped, so you couldn't fully see it. But just know that thud that you heard was him throwing it over his shoulder, and I think he busted his window, actually. But
no, I was careful not to toss it straight back there. Yep, I tried to pull a Bandrew, and, whatever. But I don't want to use it anymore. I want to actually throw it in the trash, but I'm going to keep it until I get the new one. So I could compare and contrast the information on it to see if it's, within the same power bands and amperage and voltage, that sort of stuff.
yeah, definitely the Rodecaster Pro 1 was different because it wasn't using a USB-C to power. And so for those of you who don't know that or didn't figure that out, the Rodecaster Pro 2 is using USB-C, which is why SP was able to go get a 100-watt USB-C adapter. And so that is something that it does use a power standard. And I had looked up the specs on the Rode site. The Rodecaster Pro 2 does say the power requirements are a 30-watt USB-C PD, meaning power delivery. That's the standard for USB-C. So as far as I could read, I think you got good advice from the guy at Best Buy. But the thing that I will mention is that you cannot do this with all different devices. Just keep that in mind, because some different devices, especially before USB-C PD and stuff started to come out, used adapters in weird ways. Barrel jacks didn't mean the same thing. You had some people using things like micro USB in ways that it shouldn't. Even different Ethernet ports that would deliver power sometimes were problematic. So don't willy-nilly mix your adapters. Bad idea. However, if it is something like a USB-C PD device running the proper spec, you can do what SP did and have Best Buy save your life, because I think that actually literally saved your life. Plus, it makes things just that much cooler because, again, we are J5 Create 100-watt PD adapter buddies.
Yeah, except for mine's in use right now. So next time we'll both have to hold them up, assuming I get the Rode adapter and it works. So we'll just go from there. And I will save the rest of my comments until that time.
How ominous. Moving on to the next point here, let's talk about RX11. Pause here. I want to fix your frame because, I was going to make a comment. Do I make the comment now or later? No, I'll make the comment. Oh, you know what? I will make the comment now. Hold on. Let me fix your frame first. Let's go full screen. Okay, hold on. Hold on, everybody. One sec. I got to do a little thingamajig here. And you'll... Oh, crap.
I'm Damien the DM from Adventures in Aurelia, a collaborative storytelling...
Me. Okay, everybody, you'll probably lose audio for a sec. Hold on. Can you sit up, please?
Look, sir, droids. Look, a penny.
One sec. I got one more time. You'll lose audio again, everybody. One sec. Okay, one more time.
Look, sir, droids. Look, a penny.
There we go. Okay. And 18, edit. All right.
You'll have to go to your solo shot.
All right. Oh, wait. But that's not the only studio upgrade you got, because the astute video viewer might notice that it's a little less bright behind you right now, isn't it, SP?
Yeah, I did not, in full honesty, want to go with this color. But as an early Father's Day gift, the girls bought me a new office chair. Now, I am not going to share a picture on the podcast here on YouTube of what my old chair looked like, because quite frankly, it scares me. But I needed a new chair. I went to Office Depot. I tried out some new chairs. In full honesty, if I had a little bit more money, I would be going towards a Herman Miller chair or a Steelcase chair, but it just wasn't in the cards this time around. So I went to Office Depot. This actually fit me the best. It is the Serta Brinkley office chair, high back office chair, and it is unfortunately a very dark, like a black color. It's got gray highlights in it, but I wanted to go with something brighter since we're on camera. Like my last chair was tan. This one's black. So I don't know. Do I look better, you think? Does my face look better from a color perspective? I mean, we didn't talk about it before the podcast, but what do you think of this?
I like it. I like the color. There's something about it that the little accent on either side of the head rest pillow, or whatever you want to call it, I'll call it a head restraint, because that's totally not the right term. I think it's nice, and it is a little subtle. I do understand what you mean, though, about the previous one popping a little bit. That's not the word you use, but being behind you, it did pop a bit. But I like it. I think it puts more focus on you, but I could see a case either way. I actually have to do chair shopping as well. I never shared this, but the other day, I think it was about a week ago now, I'm sitting here working, and I kind of lean back and I start hearing,
Ooh.
And long story short, I started to slowly lower down as the gas in the whatever rod you want to call it,
piston
started to escape, and yeah, then the whole house blew up, and now this is all just a big simulation. That's what it is.
So for everybody's edification, Office Depot, the Brinkley Serta chair, this was on sale. It was normally $360. I think it was on sale for $199 for Memorial Day. So the girls ordered it. It showed up over the weekend, and I was able to put it together and put it in the office over the weekend. So yeah, that's my second studio upgrade. I have, including the power cord, I guess. I have two more, but we'll discuss them on a future episode.
All right, well, let's move on to iZotope RX11, because RX11, we talked briefly about last week having been released, and made a bit of a discovery last week. I decided to jump in feet first to try to do the RX11 upgrade for last week's episode. And as I was looking through the install information, I noticed something. I noticed when you looked at the page for RX11 listing the DAWs, it listed a whole bunch of different software that's compatible with RX11, but the one that they listed that caught my attention was where it said DaVinci Resolve 19, and I also noticed it said Adobe Audition 2024. Both of those gave me pause, because I'm like, wait a minute, why are they specifying the latest? Because obviously Adobe Audition 2024 is new, and then for those of you not familiar, DaVinci Resolve 19 is the current public beta version. It's not even officially released. So I thought something's up here. My audio spidey senses were a tingling, and I went digging a little further, and what I found was in the notes there for RX11, it said all plugins are 64-bit format. RX11 plugins are not available in VST2 format. So for those of you that don't know, when we've talked about audio plugins before, traditionally they're in what's called the VST format, and largely have been the VST2 format, which is very compatible with many different pieces of software because it's been around for a long time. Well, there are VST3 plugins, and these are less compatible because it is a more modern standard. Really coincidentally, about a month or so ago, I was wanting to try an audio plugin. It was actually an NDI, not virtual cable, but that idea plugin. But it's a VST3 format, and I wanted to try it in OBS, and OBS doesn't support VST3. So that was sort of my first awareness of this whole VST3 incompatibility thing. I never actually thought to check DaVinci Resolve. And yeah, sure enough, when I did the RX11 upgrade, as soon as I opened up DaVinci Resolve, it did not show the RX11 plugins until I upgraded to DaVinci Resolve 19. So yeah, that's something that if you are doing RX11, you need to have some form of modern software. If you don't have something that's VST3 compatible, you might be stuck not using RX11. And I never noticed that in any of the information before, that it specifically calls out that it's not available in VST2. So be aware of that. And I wonder, is there any other video editing software that we use, and would it be compatible? Because like I said, I switched to DaVinci Resolve a while back, but I was using the Magix Vegas suite before. And I think you still are, SP, aren't you?
I am. So using the Magix Vegas 19, it is not compatible with VST3, but I did check with iZotope, and we had this discussion at the end of the podcast last time, I think, and I was wondering if I actually had the upgrade, because I bought RX10, and then there was the proposed free upgrade to RX11, and I don't know exactly what happened. It did not show up. The free upgrade did not show up in my portal on iZotope until I activated RX10. Once I activated RX10, like the next day, RX11 showed up. I don't know if it was a timing thing, like it was going to show up the next day, or if I had to activate 10 in order for 11 to show up. But I did activate 11, and now that forces me to, if I want to actually use it, look at upgrading from Vegas 19 to 20, or I guess 21. And yeah, I did it. I pulled the trigger. I did it. Over the weekend, I was looking at the upgrade price. It was discounted to $99. My upgrade to Vegas Pro Edit. I was using 19 Pro Edit before, and now I'm using 21 Pro Edit. And the upgrade for me going from that 19 to 21 was $99. I don't know all of their upgrade paths and costs and deals and stuff like that. If you have Vegas already or Magix already, like Magix Studio 18 or lower, you might have some sort of upgrade path to 21. But I can say it was a pretty seamless transition once I got it in and installed. 4K render, I was having problems with that, adding different artifacts on the screen, like different like JPEGs or different artifacts. I don't know what you call it. What do you call the things that you put, like
Elements?
Elements. Thank you. It put the different elements in there, and I was having problems before. It worked with no issues. I still have an audio issue where I have to make sure I go into a clean file before I render something with a lot of effects on the track. Once again, I'm not using RX11 yet. And the reason why is I wanted to get comfortable using Vegas 21 before I added the complexity of RX11. But since I had 11, I'm like, well, might as well have a path to use it. So the path to use it is next week. I will try it with Vegas 21, and 19 does not support VST3. That's a big deal there. That RX11 is a VST3. Vegas 21 supports VST3. So that's the path that I went, and we will talk about it in the future. And for the record, I'm still interested in looking at DaVinci Resolve, because, you know, the free editor and hobbyists would like free shareware basically. So I would like to use it just to get comfortable with it, but I'm using Vegas for now. So that's where I'm at. And at least you're exploring Resolve so that you can have that standpoint and that viewpoint for our viewer, listener, audience.
You might say I'm using Resolve so that we can resolve that for our listeners.
You're punny today. You know that?
Last thing before we get into our media host, you found an interesting feature that Buzzsprout started to offer, and This is a cool feature, I gotta say. This really made me smile a little bit.
Buzzsprout came out, I think it was in the London podcast convention that happened last week, but they came out with the capability to do a local backup of your podcast. If you've ever been in your podcast for a while and you just want to download all the files, different podcast media host providers don't make it easy. You have to download each individual file, or maybe go into a podcatcher app on your computer and then download them that way. Like, for example, iTunes. That's how I have a big, words are hard. That's how I have a big reservoir of podcasts. Is I have old files from my iTunes that I didn't delete in the past. So you can do that. It's a pain in the butt. You should just be able to download them like an archive file on any other application or service out there. Well, Buzzsprout made it easy. They made a capability to just click and download your audio files, and they download it as a zip file. So that's Buzzsprout's new capability there. It's back up your podcast through a zip file.
I have to say, the offline backups thing, just in my general life, has been on my round to it list for a while. It's something that I am actively thinking about multiple times a month, but not making enough progress. Even things like my photos that are uploaded directly to Google Photos and other things like that, because you are putting all your eggs in one basket when you are uploading to anything, and this applies for your podcast. I used to be so good about maintaining a separate directory with all of my audio files. I would work in a project directory, I would export that, and then I would end up either moving or copying the file from that project directory to a general podcast audio directory, so that if I ever needed to go digging up specific audio files in batch, they were right there in one directory. And along the way, I fell out of it. And so, a feature like this would be great just for me to have a reset point of go in, grab all the files that I know are in my feed, stuff them in a folder, and then either periodically do that or just, build off from there. So this is a great feature, and I wish other companies would do this. It would be nice.
I sure wish Libsyn would do that, because that's where the bulk of my shows are. I've got 5 shows on Libsyn right now, and I wish they would have a capability like this. I am almost dreading taking my shows off of Libsyn and transferring them to another podcast media host provider, which is what I'm going to do either sooner or later, but it's going to be this year. And when I do that, I know that there's going to be files, maybe draft files, maybe files that I've unpublished that are not going to make the transfer. So I'm going to have to make sure that I have all those files before I shut down my Libsyn account. So I sure wish Libsyn would do this, not just for the transfer, but it'd be nice to have the backup. Say Libsyn gets hit with ransomware. Not saying they ever have, not saying they ever will, but say they do and they lose all that data. Then all of a sudden on my older podcasts, like say any podcast before a certain date, right? And I'm going to have to make sure I have copies of that. I recently went back with Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. and was looking for some of the early episodes that I did not produce. And I thought I had those files. I did not. So I had to go in and individually download them. It wasn't a lot. It was only, 15 or so episodes, but it would have been nice just to be able to take the entire zips file. And the other thing is, I don't know about you, Stephen, but I do versions sometimes where I make a boo-boo and then I have to do a version and then send it up. So sometimes, even though I have been kind of Nazi-ish, to use a bad term, about literally keeping all of my final files in a directory, sometimes when I have versions, because of that, I might not know what actually got published. So it would be nice to have those final published versions and then take them down all in a file as well. So yeah, Libsyn does not have this. It's one of the many reasons why we're contemplating leaving Libsyn or planning to leave Libsyn in 2024 for our shows. So yeah, I wish they would. And another thing that I wish Libsyn would do is have podcasting 2.0 support, which they don't. And not that we use it, but it would be nice for them to have it, right? And we know that some of the podcast media host providers that we've reviewed so far have it, including Buzzsprout and RSS.com. So what RSS.com also announced this past week is the adding of the lit tag. Now, the lit stands for live item tag.
I thought
and
that
it-
was just saying this podcast is lit. I thought that's
Right?
what that meant.
Right? It's not. It's actually announcing to your audience that you have a live performance going on. So it'd be nice. Think in terms of better podcasting, what we're doing right now. If we had podcasting 2.0 for better podcasting, we could turn that lit tag on and announce to everybody that we are through their podcatchers, I guess, that are podcasting 2.0 compliant, that we are live and they'd be able to hear us or see us that way. And RSS.com has added that. So kudos to RSS.com for adding that. We've talked about RSS.com several times since we reviewed them. We went back and forth with their team afterwards. I have not had any direct contact with them in a couple of weeks here, but they have added that. And I think that's a feather in their cap to continue on with the development of adding podcasting 2.0 namespace tags.
You know, I've made my opinion clear about podcasting 2.0. I think that there's still a while till it's completely a must-have feature. But what I do think is that I think that it's even since we started our media host venture, I think that it started to lean more towards that way. I think there's been some changes that are definitely leaning that way. But in any case, there is a good segment of the population of podcasters who are looking for this sort of thing. And I think when you look at a media host, if they're not even acknowledging any evaluation, it'd be one thing if it's like, we've evaluated, we don't think it's ready because of X, Y, and Z. But if there's no evaluation or any consideration, I think that it's a bit of a flag of like, are they falling behind? So I think it's at least, that's one of the reasons we put it into our media host criteria. And so when you see something like this, you know that media host is at least considering where it might be trending in the world of podcasting. So kudos to them for sure.
Yeah, podcasting 2.0 is largely associated with value for value or monetization or boostograms, that sort of stuff. But what we're kind of focusing on, especially for hobby podcasters, is more along the lines of what are the other tags involved, like chapters or the lit tag. Those things that could be standardized. Transcription actually was one that was picked up by Apple Podcasts. Those types of things can happen to enhance all podcasts and not just podcast 2.0 monetization sort of stuff. So keep your eyes as more and more people actually glob on to the non-monetization tags in podcasting 2.0.
And before we get to the media host, I'm going to throw a random cutting edge topic into the Better Podderings here.
Ooh.
Is that I might be having an issue that could be related to my Mac endeavors. It could be related to another piece of hardware that would be podcasting related. And the summary is that I've noticed that today I had my external USB drive drop from the Mac. That happened just before we recorded.
Huh.
And while we've been recording, I've noticed my Stream Deck. Well, I've got two of them. One of my Stream Decks flicker on and off a couple of times. That's USB as well. So is it that the Stream Deck is malfunctioning and causing problems? Is it that there's something going on with the Mac that's causing both USB problems? It'll be something I'll have to monitor, but I'll throw that out there because it's really easy for me to throw it out right now while we're recording. So maybe someone will have some feedback about that, but it could be something I'll revisit in the future. I will say this, even on Windows, I have noticed one of my Stream Decks before start to make a high-pitched noise and need to be unplugged and plugged back in. So my money would be on there's something causing weirdness going on with the USB with the Stream Deck. I don't know that it's this one, though, because I mixed them up. So I should probably put numbers on them. So you throw it out there. See what people say.
Yeah, you could put numbers on them like you do your kids. You tattoo them with numbers so you can tell them apart, right?
I don't need to tell them apart, just as long as they're editing my podcast. That's all that matters to me.
Work harder. Work harder.
All right, we're in the media host segment, And if you haven't been following us, this media host segment is an ongoing feature for this season of Better Podcasting because, as we mentioned, we're looking to get off of Libsyn. Words are hard.
Thank you. It's not just me. I was getting better.
Because if you haven't figured it out, we are looking to get off of Libsyn, and so we're selfishly using this season to evaluate different media hosts. But that doesn't mean that we're going to exclusively stick with the path that we are likely to go, because we're looking at the whole media host space, or the ways you can host your podcast. And today is definitely in that latter category, as we are going to be talking about Patreon, which is definitely an unconventional way to look at your podcast. Now, Patreon came on the scene 11 years ago in 2013 as a way for independent creators to monetize.
Yeah, and it wasn't the first monetization crowdfunding platform. Indiegogo arrived in 2008, Kickstarter appeared in 2009, and GoFundMe popped up in 2010, along with many others. But Patreon did allow for creators to be paid by item created, by monthly donations, and added tier levels for different supporting amounts. Patreon is not a traditional podcast media hosting company, but it does have some capabilities that some of our listeners might want to check out for their specific circumstances. So even though we will not be using Patreon for Better Podcasting, I guess that's spoiler up front, the capability intrigued us enough to take a peek under the hood and see what was there and see what is it capable of. Now, to date, before our research for this episode, neither of us have any firsthand experience using Patreon with hosting our podcasts or, quite frankly, crowdfunding. Now, for this episode, I did use one of the two audio podcasts, that podcast, Pod Faded, in 2017, that the original owner has expressly allowed me to use and has stated such on his podcast. So I have record on audio of that. I did not, however, import my show from Transistor.
It's the chair. Blame the chair. The chair doesn't have all the awesomeness. You got to get that worked in. Work it in.
I need to fart in the chair a little bit more. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
I wasn't going to say it, but.
However, I did not import my show from Transistor. We'll talk about why later, but I did post episodes from that show onto Patreon, and they're on there even today. Now, Stephen, what did you do?
I planned the same way that I always do, which is creating a brand new account like I was new, starting a brand new podcast. And so that's what I did, start a new Patreon, and then go looking for the podcast section. Now, using this as a basis, we'll continue through our normal format of discussing the highlights, the neutral points, and the shortcomings of Patreon crowdfunding service from the lens of a hobby podcaster. And we'll also discuss a little bit about why you, as a producer, might want to explore Patreon in this capacity for your podcasting. We'll come back to that a little bit later. Now, we do have one more way we'd like to frame this conversation, which is that the reality is up front here, Patreon's not trying to be like a traditional media host. So if you spend more than even just a few minutes creating an account and taking a look, you're going to find that this is very apparent to you very quickly. We will come back to this, but the bottom line is that Patreon's method for doing podcasting is really trying to create RSS feeds for your existing patrons or your Patreon memberships. These can be paid or free. And so with the primary focus being geared towards offering podcasting towards your patrons, not really creating a podcast in the general podcast community distribution space. So you got to think of it a little bit differently, but we wanted to talk about it in this season because it is an unconventional, out of the box approach.
Stephen, did you know that Patreon is 100% free for you to post your content on?
Yes, I did know that actually, because you told me that.
Okay. Yeah, it sure is. Yeah, your payment, quote unquote payment, because there's nothing free. Either you are the product or you pay for the product, right? The payment in this case actually comes from the form of a fee assessed to your Patreon. So your members, the people that actually have subscriptions or that give you donations. Patreon will keep either 8% at the quote pro unquote level or the 12% at the quote premium account level from your subscribers' memberships. Patreon also charges fees for payment processing, currency conversion, sorry Canadians and everybody else out there, and the payout itself. So they hit you with fees all along the way, and that's how they make their money. So from that perspective, Patreon is not free. However, if you only have free posts, you could use Patreon to host your content for free. So with that, we're going to give it a 5 out of 5 and detail our drawbacks of what Patreon actually is in other criteria in a little bit.
And just to clarify, that's a 5 out of 5 for affordability. So just pure, can you make a podcast? And if you are, what is the monetary consideration for either spending money or maybe not? In this case, not.
One of our criterias is the company healthy? And from our perspective right now in mid 2024, Patreon is relatively healthy and it's valued at about $1.4 billion, a billion with a B. However, Patreon has had controversies in the past. We're not going to go through them right now, but controversies that have affected creators and the Patreons based on what the content could be hosted and creator fees itself, and quite frankly, the fees that are charged to Patreons. So while there is nothing on the horizon to downgrade this healthy company rating right now, things can turn for companies like Patreon on a dime or on a loonie if you're Canadian. And I won't go into all the other countries out there and the currencies out there, but just from a healthy perspective, we'll grade Patreon as it's healthy right now.
Turn on a quid. Is that the right way to use quid? Anyways.
Oh, maybe.
Now let's talk file integrity, because the file integrity is a big thing that we have looked at. And I have to say, this area surprised me because what we put up came back down unmodified. I thought something like Patreon, which is geared towards extending a service that's meant for making money, might have, done some processing. But for us, we thought that it was acceptable because we never saw any changes with our files that we uploaded.
As for reliability, Patreon has been okay in the reliability. Neither of us have any memory of Patreon going down lately. I did a search. I didn't see anything out there in the news or the interwebs. With that said, we are given the benefit of the doubt as how Patreon works. We don't have a ton of feedback on the actual file serving reliability, but we haven't heard of anything. So we'll just say it's reliable, it's acceptable in our criteria rating. And as far as socials, Stephen, what did you find?
They seem up to date as far as the icons that are out there, because the social share icons, which is where you can create a link for basically then using elsewhere manually, do have X listed instead of Twitter, and they even have a link to TikTok. However, that is more from the perspective of updatability. Do they look current? Now, in the actual integration, we do come back to this a little bit later, that leaves basically nothing. There's no automatic integration in there, but we wanted to call out these shared icons because it shows that they're not stuck in the past. They are actually paying attention to the current trends. And so that's a bit of an indicator of, are they servicing this? That's a question mark we had before about a similar service, whether or not they were staying up to date. Now, the other thing that I think was interesting was looking at the list of the file types that they accept, because they do list all of the ones that we would be looking for as hobby podcasters. They have AAC, MP3, M4A, MP4, MPEG, OGG, WMA, flash from the past, WAVE, and then there was two listed, which was X M4A and X WAVE. Now, not familiar with those last two, but obviously they must be important enough that they added it. So maybe if anybody has any experience with this, you could let us know where would you use that. But again, they had a whole bunch of file types that they will accept.
And then for the video file types they accept, they look at GIFs, MOVs, MP4s, M4As, MPEGs, and OGGs. So video is a separate consideration that they have annotated. Patreon obviously offers subscriptions and memberships for your audience. It's the whole basis of the company. And while this has never been a criteria for us, we mention it for your reference as a podcaster. And lastly, in the highlights, we should mention that the name familiarity of Patreon probably does play some advantage if you're looking to collect money from people. Let's say you use company ABC for hosting, and Stephen, remind me to register that domain name, for the future, because I think it would be great for your Canadian hosting company. And they offer memberships. Will your members feel good about authorizing a payment to ABC Hosting if they don't know who they are? They're more likely to throw it at a known company like Patreon. I admit, I only crowdfund from Patreon to other creators, either podcasts or writers or whatever. I use Patreon exclusively for that because I'm just comfortable with it. And even though I know that there's been controversies in the past, which again, we're not going to go through, I consider it a cost of doing business, at least for now. All right, that's it for the highlights.
Wow,
we're going to move into the neutral zone. And Stephen, if you don't mind, I'll take this first one. Does Patreon offer a 301 redirect? Nope, they sure don't. But this is not why a creator would use Patreon or uses Patreon. Could this have been in the shortfall section? Yeah, it could have. But we decided to park this in the neutral zone simply because if you use Patreon, it's most likely as a last resort backup for your pod fading show, or maybe you have some hope to make some small money or coin, as I put it in the show notes. So it's kind of, I want to place this somewhere with a hope of leveraging that Patreon namespace to make some money off of a creation that I did in the past. And people do that. They'll put, like artists, they'll put stuff up there and then people will pay for it years later for a donation, maybe not a subscription, but through a donation. So from that perspective, I say, okay, there's also, when I was writing this, I was thinking in terms of Spotify for podcasters, which is free and you can monetize through downloads there. But I think you'd stand more as a hobby podcaster, you'd probably stand more of a chance of monetizing through something like crowdfunding versus Spotify for podcasters and the download. I just think the ROI would be bigger for you on Patreon than a media host provider that you're depending on those download stats in order to get monetization. So that's why this is in the neutral zone. But normally, if they don't have a 301 redirect, number one, we're not going to talk about it. And number two, it's going to be a shortfall if we do talk about it. So that's a big disclaimer on why it is where it's at.
Now, the next one we wanted to talk about in the neutral zone is, in the context of this seems to be a way to extend to your patrons on a podcast. It really feels like they've got 3 feet in 3 different doors. I know, that's just a great analogy there.
Is there something in the water? Maybe radiation where you are? I mean, 3 feet. That's like Fallout stuff.
Yeah, no comment. But when you look at setting this up in Patreon, you have a few different options that are available. The first is what we are largely referring to throughout this episode, which is a direct RSS feed creation. Essentially, you can go in there and get an RSS feed for your patrons who will end up getting their own unique RSS feed. But there's also options in there as you go through setting it up to do a Spotify integration or do an Acast integration. So not entirely clear as you set it up, the differences between the 3, but it really feels like almost a choose your own adventure, which doesn't feel super streamlined. So someone who might have a Patreon going and want to extend it to podcasting, I could see that getting a little bit confused. But on the flip side, at least there's options. So I guess you got to call it a bit of a wash because the idea of the direct RSS feed might not be as appealing to some people as the Acast integration, for example.
Moving on to the next criteria, the player. To us, it seems decent. Stephen liked the bouncing waveform.
I like pretty things.
Yeah. which is why you don't like me. But it is lacking, the player on Spotify is lacking some features such as volume and speed and stuff that you would consider just standard on other podcast features, players on other podcast media host providers. So it's in the neutral section. Also, normally we put Patreon's data limitations in the highlights, but I don't know about you, Stephen, the way it was described for video and audio, it was very confusing, and it led me to be not entirely sure of what exactly is being offered. So let's try to talk through it here and see if we can come to some consensus. First of all, it said videos cannot exceed 12 hours. Okay. I know there's some people that do marathons, so maybe they're streaming I don't know, some sort of a tournament, a game playing tournament for 8 hours, whatever, and they want to put that on Patreon. Okay, so I could see that. And uploads, though, are limited to either 5 gigabytes or 200 megabytes. I'm not entirely sure what that means. Maybe they're saying 5 gigabytes for video and 200 megs for everything else. I don't know. Maybe some people upload these huge PDF files on their novels that they're creating chapter by chapter that need an excessive amount of space. I don't know. The other thing, though, that we do know is there's no download limit. So once you get it uploaded, there's no limit to how many times it can be downloaded. And I think part of that, we always say that a media host provider for podcasting, at least, is justified in putting some sort of throttling either on the upload or download. We prefer the upload, but we know that different companies do the throttling on the download as well. And in this case, there's no download limits, and I can see why, because Patreon doesn't have the amount of traffic that a very popular podcast would. If you have a popular podcast that gets 1 million downloads per episode, and then you stack that, maybe it's daily and it gets millions of downloads per day, that's going to be a hefty bill for a media host provider to pay. Patreon, it's not ever going to be in the millions of dollars. You're not going to get 1 million members of your audience paying for some content. So you're never really going to see that. So I can see how they don't have download limits.
Now, for the graphical user interface, we'll say it's okay. It's definitely less confusing than some of the ones we've seen, but also Patreon doesn't really offer a true RSS in the sense that you get one RSS feed, you throw it out to the world uses that, and it is from a more closed garden perspective, meaning that a lot of the interface things are really, again, trying to tie back to that Patreon membership. So it operates well, but features are lacking. So, you know, if you are looking at this from the context of, I want to have a Patreon membership, it will be easy to navigate and see probably the information you're looking for from that perspective.
Now, as I mentioned above, Patreon does allow for video. And once again, we're not quite sure what that limit is, but it's at least 5 gigabytes or 12 hours, I guess, whichever comes first. And again, back to that comment of it's not well described. Give me a better explanation, maybe with pictures. I like pictures, so maybe something like that will do. Anyway, Patreon keeps the video in its own walled garden, just like Spotify does. So you're not going to be able to distribute it like an RSS feed. Like if you wanted a true video RSS feed, and I've seen that more and more lately, by the way, because more and more people are creating video podcasts, you're not going to get it on Patreon. You're not going to get that direct RSS feed for it. It's just publicly available. It's only in their walled garden. It's not publicly available. So you're not going to be able to put that feed into a podcatcher and have it downloaded 1,000 times per episode. It's just going to be individualized to the specific Patreon that you have at whatever tier that you're allowing it to be. And even if it's free, I just don't see it being really hit all that hard. Now, one criteria that we added in the middle of this review season is the ability to backdate your audio episode. And unlike Substack, which is kind of a comparison if you're dealing with subscriptions and crowdfunding, unlike Substack, Patreon does allow you to backdate an audio episode. But I discovered not all posts are backdatable. I had to do, I don't know if you had to do this, Stephen, or not, but I had to do an introductory post, and I could not backdate that post to previously to the first episode that I wanted to post from 2015. It had to be today or later. I could not go back to 2015. I couldn't go back to 2021, couldn't go back to 2023, couldn't go back to last month. So there is a limit to what they're allowing for backdatability. And that kind of makes sense a little bit to me because of the monetization of the platform. But it was just curious to me the differences between how Substack does it, which you can't, and how Patreon does it, which you can, but only certain posts. So maybe a little confused about that. And so we'll give Patreon partial credit for this and keep this criteria grading that we have in the neutral zone. And Stephen, that's it for the neutral zone. Now we got to go to the shortcomings.
Wow, who would have thought a criteria meant for hobby podcasters is quickly getting to the shortcomings. Moving on to the shortcomings, pretty much everything you've got in your head for a media host, get that out of your mind because it's probably not there. This is a massive shortcoming when it comes to using Patreon for podcasting. And I would say even for people who are not hobby podcasters, people who are just looking to create podcasts that make money, if they have any concept of what media hosting involves or creating podcasts on a media host involves, they're likely to be looking for a lot of features. It very much operates from the, well, you can kind of do podcasts section. It's a very added on feel. And because of that, there's a lot of things missing. So be aware of that as you start your ventures into Patreon podcasting. This includes very few customization options for your podcast. This is by episode, this is by settings for the general podcast. Even setting it up, there are very few things that you will find for your podcast. I think this is, again, because they're like, well, we want to offer some form of podcasting, so do it our way or do it elsewise.
In that light, there is no independent website. There's just the Patreon website out there. And as I mentioned before, I believe on A Better Podcasting, if not, it was on the Get a Geek show, I had problems like finding the individual patrons accounts or that I was a membership of in the app when they redesigned the app. I got it down now, but if you ever run into a problem where you're in somebody's exclusive garden and they can't find you on that exclusive garden, that's an issue. Now, that just might be me, and I'm not that adept at navigating apps that kids think are very navigationable, but I had a problem with that. So there's no independent website. There's only where they can find you on the site, and there are issues with that, at least that I have found in the past. The help documentation, it's significantly lacking. So we looked over things. Stephen, you looked multiple times. I skimmed through it. And then eventually we had to look to external pages to find out and understand a few things. For instance, the file upload limits. I was like, this makes no sense. I need to go somewhere else. And unfortunately, nobody else could really answer the question, but even the help section wasn't great with that for me. It feels like you should be able to find more, especially since their entire being is, let's make it easy for you so you can make money so we can skim off the top of it.
And one of the things, I'll give you a little insight baseball here. I said insight baseball, but I'm going to leave it. Is that when we're doing these reviews, I like to start diving into the help section early to get a bit of a feel and see what's out there. And I really felt like I just had to create an account to really understand what it could fully do. There just was a lot of missing information in the help, and I found far more by just creating an account and trying to get into the podcast section. So yeah, the help documentation is definitely lacking, and I think that could be a problem for people, especially people who are not technical. So I wish they would do that. Like you said, they have a good reason to try to support people on this endeavor.
Yeah, we've mentioned the RSS feed limitations before. We're going to talk about them a little bit more in detail right now, because is there a general RSS feed that you can throw out there? Not that I found, and Stephen, not that you found either. all the RSS feeds that I am subscribed to for podcasts, because I give money and so I'm a member, I'm a Patreon of them. I get an individual RSS feed that I'm able to copy and paste into my podcatcher. So I can either listen to the show that way, or I can listen or view the show through their site. But I can't go in to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and download that RSS feed. I actually have to manually add it in order for it to be added, and it's individualized to me. So say I don't pay for top tier, so there's some bonus exclusive episodes that I don't get, and they don't show up in that RSS feed. So I appreciate them creating individual RSS feeds like this. But on the other hand, it's like, this is not free and open podcasting. We've seen with Spotify just this year that their walled garden version of podcasting failed. They had exclusive contracts with different creators, some massive creators like Joe Rogan, and they did not allow them, all these creators, to have episodes out in the free and open architecture. So instead of growing, they had their core audience, which was giving money, but that core audience shrunk over time to the point where Spotify wasn't able to leverage a growing membership. I think they thought that people would go to Spotify and like, I want to see what this is all about. So they would give Spotify money, and then Spotify would be able to pay their creators off of it. But that just wasn't the case. The way podcasting works is you get it for free. And then if you like the content, you can sign up for more, or you can do a value for value sort of thing. So the fact that they don't have a general and open RSS feed, I think fits their business model, but it is a shortcoming when you're talking about podcasting, because podcasting is based on open architecture.
Now let's talk a bit about the uploading, because honestly, the uploading feels like they took an existing post page for Patreon and made it work with podcasting. There's very few fields, and it seems focused less on what podcasting would want for those fields and more like what's the bare minimum that we can do to make podcasting work. It's a lot of empty space and not a lot of things to add.
Yeah, the stats, I really wasn't able to delve into them because I didn't have a lot of downloads, surprisingly, because even though the episodes were for free, nobody's going to go to Patreon to find them, right? But it's just not episodic. It's very playback based. It's very per post based. So I think you're not going to find your standard podcasting stats, which I don't know if it's a problem or not, because if you're on Spotify, you're not going to add ads. And this is a little spoiler. There's some more shortcomings coming for that in the future, but the stats, they're just not there. As a podcaster, they don't make me feel comfortable like other podcast media host providers do. And then also,
you said Spotify, by the way. You said if you're on Spotify about ads. So
I'm having lots of problems.
I was just
today.
taking a minute thinking, am I missing the connection? And that's why I didn't interrupt right away, but go ahead.
I don't even know where to start. I'm just going to have to start all over.
Okay.
Unless you want to take it.
No, that's fine. Just say, oh God, what did you say?
Okay.
I'm sorry.
As far as the stats, they feel very subscription based. They're not episode based. They're not really playback based. So they don't feel like normal podcasting stats. They feel like they're stats for Patreon, like per post. So you're not going to get the same sort of look. You're not going to get the same, how long did my audience actually listen through? Like I guess the stat that really counts on Patreon is, are they paying me? And are my payments going up or are they going down? So you can gauge your engagement on that, I guess. So stats, it's not what we have seen on other podcast media host providers. And along those lines, there's no ID3 tags. So no capability to tag your files with ID3. You just upload the file and that's where it's at. And there is a capability to download the file, by the way. I downloaded the file, and that's the way I was able to determine if they changed the file or not. And if you're able to download the file, I think from my perspective, you want ID3 tags on it because it's going to be living on somebody else's computer.
Now, getting back to that point that SP mentioned earlier about trying to transfer from Transistor, hey, it didn't matter because there's no import feature because that's not how you're using Patreon, apparently. So don't think about importing your podcast to Patreon. It's not going to happen. And also along
Which is a pain, by the way, because then if you say you're transitioning your podcast that has 50 episodes,
okay,
you have to individually post all 50 episodes.
Yeah. And similarly, if you're looking for creator tools, it's not happening for podcasters. You have to record and edit elsewhere before you're going to post on Patreon, so don't think that's going to happen. Also, if you're getting into Podcasting 2.0, well, don't even think about it because it's not going to happen. As we mentioned earlier in the show, Podcasting 2.0 is featured more on a different standard for money making, so at the moment, I don't see this coming, but it doesn't matter what might come or not. It's not there now. And then back to the social media thing. Yeah, there's no auto posting. As great as it was to see the X icon and see the TikTok icon for modern social media platforms, there's no auto posting. So if you're trying to drive people to subscribe to your Patreon, because if you're using Patreon, clearly you're trying to do that, you got to do some manual work. You're not finding automatic posting there. But Patreon does allow you to have multiple team member accounts. So there you go. If you subscribe on the premium level, because there is a premium level available for Patreon. So if you get to the premium level, then you end up having multiple team accounts, which for the hobby podcaster is probably not going to be you.
No. There sadly also is no dynamic audio insertion. And this is largely probably because ads don't really work with shows on Patreon. So I can kind of understand this. It's crowdfunding. It's not meant for ads. However, dynamic audio insertion is not just for ads. It's also giving the creator the ability to place announcements in every episode whenever they're listened to or download. And that is the benefit of dynamic audio insertion, at least for hobby podcasters that I can figure out. And so because there's no dynamic audio insertion, that's why this criteria ranks in the shortcomings. And also, as far as we could tell, there is no way to return a post to draft status, which kind of follows with the monetization aspect of Patreon. Once a post is out, it should remain out for those that have paid for it, even if it's wrong, apparently. So I think you can delete it, but you can't return it to draft. So yeah, that's another shortcoming. And Steven, fall, spring, summer, winter?
Can you hold that thought? Sorry,
Yeah.
1 sec.
What did I do?
No, I got to run for a sec. 1 sec. I'll be right back.
All right, I'll dance. Dance, monkey, dance. So thank you, everybody, for showing up today. It's pretty cool. Liberty Dude, if you're still there, I did not realize we had the same type of... I'm 100% sure it's not the exact same shirt, but it's funny. It does look the same, doesn't it? And no, we don't have Better Podcasting merch. But one thing that I wanted to add, and I'll probably add this at the end of the show, it's summer here on Better Podcasting, so it's time for another mug giveaway. So what I'll want you to do is go to our Discord in the Better Podcasting channel and say if you want a mug. This has to be from somebody that hasn't had a mug before. Steven has put that criteria out before, so we'll just go with it. So if you have not received a Better Podcasting mug before and want one, let me know in the Better Podcasting channel on our Discord server, which you can find at betterpodcasting.com/Discord, and I'll just send you one. You'll have to give me your address, but I'll send you one out, and everybody that's got one really likes them so far. They're actually really good mugs. They hold a lot, and they look great, and I enjoy them, and the handle is nice and big, so you can get your whole fist in there. So yeah, that's something I plan to do. That's a spoiler in the future. So we're going to get to our summary here in a little bit, but...
Sorry about that.
Okay.
I was so busy showing the cat pre-show, I forgot to take the dog out. She was needing to go.
Oh.
Sorry about that.
It's all right.
You said Stephen Fall. Where were we at?
Yeah, fall, spring, summer, seasons is what I was getting to.
Oh, right. I assume that you're not looking forward to winter and you're wanting to bring up the concept of seasons. Is that right?
I might be looking forward to winter in about another month when it gets to be 120 degrees here, but there are no seasons available on Patreon. It's always the same time of year, apparently. And do they care? Did your last post make money? That's what they care about over on Patreon. So yeah, they don't care about seasons, which is odd. I would think with authors that you'd want the ability to maybe do different books and separate it that way. So maybe some sort of season tag would work that way. But as far as I can tell, they don't have that.
And along similar lines to seasons, there are so few general podcasting features that we just got to throw this in on its own point. You can pretty much assume that any new standards or norms that are going to come out in the podcasting space are probably not going to be added until there's some weird way that it benefits Patreon, because they're just lacking. So keep that in mind. You're probably not sure where the future proofing is for some of those podcasting features that might come out. Maybe it's chapter markers or something like that. So just keep that in mind.
To summarize, using Patreon as a full-up open RSS podcast media hosting capability is never going to be recommended for us or from us. Patreon simply lacks the full open RSS publishing capability that even Substack provides. However, we acknowledge that is not why you use Patreon. Podcasters usually use Patreon to provide a crowdfunding option for their audience, or even just to provide extra content for your patrons. But as we dictated so far, you can use Patreon to park your show once you stop producing it, for example. It might not be the best option since there's no open RSS to keep in podcast directories, but you might get paid for it in the process just due to the name recognition if people can find you on the service.
I'm going to be honest with you, SP. Can I be honest with you for a minute?
I'll time you.
I actually personally might rate them lower than Substack for this endeavor we're going on. Because yes, Substack has a fair share of problems, but there are sections as you go through it where I personally could see that they were trying to offer a add-in media host service to the platform. Now, did they fail at that? Yes, but there were elements where I felt like, okay, I can kind of see where they're going, but I just didn't feel that with Patreon. It really just feels like this is something that is just a tacked on feature. I feel like, though, you know, it was easier to navigate around Patreon than Substack. I will say that Substack was very confusing even to get going. With Patreon, if you were somebody who did want to maybe get paid, like you said there, you're like, okay, I'm a hobby podcaster, but maybe I'll put this out there and see what happens. I think if you were to start crawling up the Substack tree, you'd get confused and probably driven away very quickly. But here, if it's like, okay, let me see if I can try to get something as a hobby podcaster, you'd be up and going pretty easily as a second option. So the bottom line for me is I felt like in the context of a media host, I just feel like it's a complete failure all in all. But with the things, the comments we made many times, it's not really why you're looking to use Patreon. So there is a use case, I think, for Patreon, but it's not going to be your main media host. And I struggled. Was that a minute?
You did indeed. Yeah. Now, if you're ever in the boat to want to place your show somewhere for free, Patreon is an option for you to check out. Just know that your show will not be searchable in the podcast directories, and there's no way to 301 redirect your show out if you ever want to put it back out in the common market, unless you post it one episode at a time.
Say podcasts.
Podcast. Podcast. Podcast.
Say podcasts.
Podcasts. Podcasts. Podcasts. Podcasts. Podcasts.
Okay.
Podcasts.
I don't know where that's. I might miss that, Damien. Thanks for the heads up. I'll see if I fit that in.
This is where we here at Better Podcasting turn the show over to you as we run through some of your feedback. We call this segment Better Podback.
All right. right, this first one came courtesy of Randy Walker in our Discord, and he pointed out that Shure was end-of-lifing the current Motive desktop app and replacing it with Motive Mix. He even went and created a separate thread if you're somebody that uses one of these two apps. Make sure to go talk with him about that because he had some questions. But he brought it up, and when I got looking for the new replacement app, where did I head on over? I headed to the reviews for the app, and do you know what I found, SP, in there?
What'd you find?
I found a lot of unhappy people. There's 26 reviews listed currently, and it's sitting at less than a 2 out of 5 star rating. When I look at it, it doesn't give me an average, but it does have less than 2 stars that are marked. Now, one of the things I found consistently coming up, and this is why I wanted to actually talk about this in this show, was there were several people in the reviews talking about a lack of support for certain hardware that was used in the Shure Motive app, specifically the MV7 microphone. So people were saying it wasn't supported. Now, I don't know what's going to come up, but I'll give you a couple headlines here. Quote from Jordan P. "This app is terrible." Quote from Wizard-like. "Makes mouse clicks often not work when opening."
Ooh.
Quote from Stepdad. "Why is it like this?" So there's just a lot of... Go have a look. I'll make sure to put the link over at betterpodcasting.com/298. You can see all of the different comments in there, and it looks like it's universally panned.
Well, a couple of notes. First of all, any online reviews that are like that and they don't have specifics, I wonder if it's being review bombed.
No,
So
sorry,
that's
I should
just a
clarify.
consideration.
Those were headlines. Those were just headlines. So there
Okay.
was expansions on that.
Okay, good. The other thing that I will say in Shure's defense, not that I want to defend Shure, but over the past couple of years, they have been modernizing their capabilities. They've had new microphones out. They obviously tried new software. Maybe it didn't work, but they are actually spending money to modernize. So if they can fix this and you can go with some of their other microphones, like they have a new stage microphone that's out there. There's the Shure SM7DB that's out there. They've modernized the MV7 to the MV7 Plus. So they are doing things. It would just be nice if they did things correctly. So we'll see what happens in the future there.
One last quote for you. Can I give you one last quote?
Yeah, please.
This was from our Discord from Randy, and he said, "Has anybody installed this yet? I did, and it's weird." So there you go.
Okay, there you go. It's weird. Also, we had a new audience member, at least new to our Discord, come into the Discord, John Caulfield, and he said, "New around here, but have been enjoying the podcast for a while. I'm surprised Acast hasn't come up yet on your podcast host topic. I use it for our podcast and I find it absolutely fantastic, and it's free. They do have a paid version, but that's really just for ad integration, which isn't anything interesting, a hobby podcast. Been using Acast for more than a year, and I'm glad I chose it when starting out." John, I will say you're not the only person that has approached us with Acast. Might be the only person in the Discord, but we put it on our list. I will say, I don't know. I can't commit to the fact that we're actually going to review it. Stephen and I briefly discussed it. It is on the list. And in that light, we are quickly ramping down this season of Better Podcasting. We're preparing to make our decision of where we want to put our podcasts. And there's only a few more weeks left. So in that light, if there is any podcast media host service that you really want us to review as a hobby podcaster, we will look at it and determine whether or not we're going to look at it or not. We have peripherally looked at a few, so it might come down to just a mention, a footnote, basically at the end of the season, but we'll get there when we get there. In the meantime, if you have any, now is the time to speak up while we make our plans to finalize the rest of the season.
Yeah, so make sure that if you have a suggestion, you tell me what you want, what you really, really want.
Also, as we are approaching summer of 2024, I think it's time to do another giveaway. So
Ooh.
go to our Discord server in the Better Podcasting channel. And if you have not yet received a mug from me, go ahead and put your name down there. The first person that is there, I will send a mug to. Now, in this light, in our live recording, somebody has already approached me. So I will take that and I will send that mug, but I am prepared to send another one. So as soon as this episode comes out, it's published, go ahead. And if you're the first person to say, SP, I want a mug, then you'll have to give me your address and DMs, and then I will send you the mug. And so I'm prepared to give two right now. It's the bountiful summer of 2024 mugs for better podcasting.
SP just wants you to slide into his DMs and send your address.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Thanks, everybody, for checking out another episode of Better Podcasting. If you would like to talk about awesome podcast content, come on over to our Discord at betterpodcasting.com/Discord, or you can talk some of the other geeky topics that are in the Discord server, or check out some of the other awesome podcasts over on the Gonna Geek Network at gonnageek.com. And make sure you follow along line by line, subscribe to SP's newest Patreon, which I believe is the Tales of the Rodecaster Pro 2.
Yes, with daily updates, apparently.
So, for episode number... Well, that's the wrong one. So, for episode number 298 of Better Podcasting, I'm Steven saying, wow, I can't believe that we're almost through the media host reviews.
MSP saying, I got to choose media host provider soon. So we might get there sooner than later. See everybody next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for checking out another episode of Better Podcasting. You can find the full back catalog of Better Podcasting at betterpodcasting.com. If you're into geeky podcasts, please check out the other podcasts on the Gonna Geek Network at gonnageeknetwork.com. This show was produced and edited by Stephen Jondrew. Voice work was done by L.W. Salinas. Thanks again for listening or watching, and we hope to see you again next week.
Pushing all sorts of buttons too early. Thanks, everybody.
So, Stephen, I want to ask you a question.
Yes.
I know this has been a topic on our past episodes, and maybe we need to explore it in the future. But have you been keeping track of 11 Labs' new speech-to-speech capability?
No, I haven't looked at that one yet. I've been looking at some of the other stuff, but I haven't actually tested that yet. But, yeah.
So say you're looking for a voiceover for an intro or an outro, and you just don't want to deal with going out and getting a voice actor. Now, we have Lauren Sithwich, my co-host over on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. That's who does our voiceover here. We have other voiceovers on other shows. But say you're creating a new show and you just don't have time. What you can do is you can do the voiceover, but if you want a different voice, you can upload that audio file into 11 Labs. You can choose one of their voices that are available at whatever tier that you're like. The free tier, there's not much, but you can pay and get more voices. And then the voice that comes back is the same inflection, the same pause, the same emotion as you put in there, but it's in somebody else's voice.
Yeah, I did see that when I was experimenting with 11 Labs, but I thought there was maybe a change or something that came up with that. But it is something that I think Johnny also was following that, if I remember correctly, from way back. I think he commented about that in our Discord, the voice-to-voice idea. But it definitely would be interesting to see how much that enables people, because, you know, synthesized voices on their own text-to-speech, you're stuck with the inflections that they choose. And while it is, you know, my experimenting I was doing was pretty good, it might not be what you want. And so being able to do your own in the style you want and have it replace would definitely go a long way. So
I could also see it being used in audio dramas. Like one person could conceivably do an entire audio drama on your own. That's a heck of a lot of work. I know some people like that sort of stuff, but that's another use for hobby podcasters. So I would say in a pinch, because on the free level, there's all sorts of limitations. There's a limitation to how many voices there are. And as this gets populated, the free stuff is just going to be, you're going to hear it everywhere. You're going to hear the same voice everywhere because it's free.
Yeah.
Right. So you have that as a consideration, but it's available. So if you want to use, it's like Incompetech.com, for royalty-free music. All of a sudden you hear it everywhere, which is one of the reasons that we chose to go for a track that we found on Pond 5 that subsequently people heard on professional stuff like commercials and talk shows and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah. I got to say, I follow some of this through my work endeavors, and while I know that eventually it will just put me out of a job, the reality is that one of the things that I'm interested about getting the decent sounding synthesized voices for work endeavors is from a personal perspective. It recently occurred to me, I've for those of you that don't know, I create training and stuff like that for a living, and one of the things that occurred to me is in past when people have created something that has voice work in it or whatever, it ends up they're gone from the company. Well, good luck doing edits. That's the nature of it. It has come to make I wasn't concerned so much putting this out, just whatever, people utilizing it, because my test with the 11 Labs thing was just pulling an episode of Better Podcasting and it worked. But I hate the idea that eventually, something nefarious, if, like a company, and I don't think my company would do this, but, a company would just be like, okay, let's just cut a corner. That person's gone. Let's just run them through there and keep creating work of that person after they've departed the company. That thought occurred to me. And
well, that's part of the Scarlett Johansson lawsuit too now,
yeah.
right?
And so that's where the whole legal aspect of it, I look forward to that catching up, because I could see a lot of companies, how many companies have you seen out there that are very willing to cut corners? And, let's look at stock images, for example. How many big companies and organizations have had their individual employees go and create a PowerPoint with a watermark on it? Because they're not controlling that low level stuff, but it's technically not allowed, right? So it's very easy for people to do that. And I worry that if these laws don't catch up soon, eventually, and like I said, I don't think my company would do it, but let's say if someone was trying to, and I'd left the company and they're like, well, everything else is great, but we need to make this one change. Let's just throw them through 11 Labs, right? And I don't like that idea. And again, that's just a hypothetical. I don't think my company would do that. But that whole thought about protecting people who are doing stuff currently gets alleviated a little bit. And yes, it drives people a bit out of work. But, if all of a sudden they're creating stuff with a fully synthetic voice. So.
Yeah, it's not just creation. There's other aspects of work that AI, machine learning, LLMs, creativity. What do you call things like DALL-E? Are they image generation capabilities or something?
Generative AI.
Generative AI. So there are different. Can you even think in terms of teaching? Could you do that via an AI, right? The stuff that I do at work, you could possibly do a lot of that at AI, not my specific job, but a lot of the jobs at the organization I work with. But in the end, there's going to be some need for a human at a higher level, at least for now.
Yeah.
Eventually, AI is the worst it's ever going to get today. It's just going to get better from here. There are considerations for power consumption, like how much power is this going to take to do all this stuff? But maybe that will go away eventually as well. So it is a concern, but specifically right now for hobby podcasters, because I've seen it on r/podcasting referred to, like, what's the best generative AI for voices? Not I want to create a podcast with generative AI, but I want to do a voiceover or whatever. What's the best way to do that? Or what's the best way to create a character on an audio drama using my own voice? and 11 Labs speech to speech seems to be coming up. I know there's a few others,
I
but
might
11
have
Labs
actually
seems to
tested
be the
that with
biggest
my
one.
test. I think I did take a clip and run it through and change it. I mostly was focusing on the text to speech, but I think I did still do one. I'd have to go back and look. I stopped subscribing to that. And I'm also, by the way, speaking of generative AI, I'm a year into my Adobe, because I don't know if I mentioned that, but I didn't realize that I got locked into a year Adobe subscription when I tested that.
You did. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, hey, do you got a bill on you, like a $5 bill?
No.
Okay, that's
I
fine.
don't have
Actually,
a
your
wallet here.
yeah, that's okay. Your quality's not coming through great anyways. I was gonna.
Yeah.
I
I was like, what's going on?
I don't know, but whatevs. Anyways,
Wow.
that's weird.
I'm not uploading anything. What's going on?
It's probably something in the intertubes. I've lost actually. Hold on, where did that go? I've lost the control. There it is. Let me. I'm gonna push a. There must be a button here. Let's do that one. Does that one do anything? Nope. Let me see. Video off. Ha! I turned your video off. Let's turn it back on. Does that do
Alright,
anything?
My internet is okay.
Weird. Okay, so I've lost you in the control room now. But-
Command.
I see you in the control room, but it's not coming through. Weird. I'm assuming it's got to be something video related because it's
Yeah,
not
no
really
lost
showing you here.
packets. I don't know if you can hear me or not. No
I
lost
can.
packets. I'm doing a ping and a speed test, and I am I'm fine. I got gig symmetrical, so it's not on my end. I'm not saying it's maybe not my computer, but it's not my connection.
Yeah. No, it's actually getting better now. So I wonder if the speed test
Kicked it.
kicked it because it's you're 5x5 now. So
I
weird.
don't have them on my wallet. on
Anyways,
me,
I was
so-
good for the Patreon one. I was gonna stage a thumbnail, but that's okay. Here.
Oh,
here-
I
here,
can
you know what,
go
do-
grab it really quick.
Do that. Okay, fine. Yeah, I could
Okay.
Photoshop Canadian money in. So. Hi, everybody. We'll be disconnecting in a minute. Like the Wizard of Oz, Steven controls how SP looks. Oh, I wish I was. I don't remember the exact details. Was there actually a man behind the curtain, or did it just turn out to be the witch? It's been so long. I don't remember. Somebody tell me. No, the man behind the curtain was a figment of the witch, right? In the Wizard of Oz.
The man behind the curtain was the guy that was trying to run Oz.
Oh.
He was like somebody that got caught from Kansas, and he was
Oh, okay.
Star Wars chair. So in full reality, that Star Wars strip has been on my chair for quite some time. It's actually just a strip.
What was that?
I've-
Which convention was that?
that I got the strip.
Yeah.
It actually was from like some merch that
Oh, I don't know why I
bought.
thought you got it at a convention. I don't know what I was thinking.
I might. No, I had it before I went to Celebration. I went to Celebration in 2019 in Chicago before the pandemic, and it seems like a lifetime ago.
Look at the camera. All right, I'll screenshot that. Was my money in there? Hold on. Whatever. You're
I don't know.
going down again, so it's fine. It'll work. I assume it's got to be video. That's what it's got to be. Let me do a speed
All right.
test. Let me do a speed test on my end, and everybody, the quality will get probably super poor now because I'm gonna throttle my connection. Let's see. Let's have a looky loo here. Let's have a lucky loo. Oh,
Yeah,
Apparently, I
I'm
haven't run it
terrible.
yet because it wants to know my location.
Are you uploading your backup right now?
What backup?
Backblaze?
Nope. Nothing's going on there. I set that to only go at night right now. In the evening.
Oh, that's bit me before, so
Yeah, I know I really shouldn't, but after that,
Control
I wanted to
panel.
limit the problems for the testing. No, it's good. So, I assume it's video. Or it could be because I think video there. I was looking actually coincidentally before the show, looking at some of the options that were in there because got looking through the change log, and I think there is something about setting up the room to go through a server. Yeah, but it's off by default. So it could be something in the peer-to-peer connection between you and I.
So allegedly,
But so you're back now.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, cool. I got no glasses. Doesn't work.
Just lean your forehead back.
There we go. It's stuck. Oh, that's disgusting. I have to wash that later.
Your forehead? So before we record next time,
We're still live, by the way. Don't know if you know.
I
that.
know.
Okay.
Before we record next time, Starship could launch.
Oh, I'm glad I got that episode out.
The 5th. It's scheduled for the 5th, so it might be the
wasn't
day
Starship,
that we record.
though, right? What was the one that was supposed to go that didn't go for gonna geek?
It's Starliner.
Starliner? Starlink.
Yeah, Starliner. Boeing.
I think that the bidding needs to start way lower. All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming on by. I hope you had yourself a fun time. And hey, oh, you know what? Is next week the week that I can't? No, it was later in June, wasn't it?
So this is looking at SP through bear goggles. That's what you're.
Keep your eyes on social media. Oh, my forehead feels awful.
Really? You gave yourself COVID just by putting a loony up there?
No, I break out over everything because I'm like 14 years old still, apparently.
Oh.
But hold on, I'm trying to find. Is it next week the one that I can't do the Wednesday? Hold on, I don't think so. I think it was later in June.
We have not discussed this. It's not ringing a bell.
I know I did send it to you.
Okay. Oh yes, that's right. We talked about you had commitment.
Oh, hold on. Let me find it. Just make sure it's not next week. I don't think it is next week.
I think it is the following week because the following week I can't go. The 19th is off for me.
Hold on.
We were talking while we.
I can't find it in our chat, but I can find it elsewhere. Let me just double check. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was the 12th because we were talking about maybe 2 weeks.
It is the 12th. Yes. Okay. Perfect. So.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll have to announce
which means, well, you can't go the 12th. I can't go the 19th. So if we're going to, we were talking about changing the 12th.
Well, we'll have to talk because that would be episode 300, won't it? Not that it matters,
Yeah.
but
8. Yeah, that would be 300.
jeez, can't believe we've done 300 of these things.
Oh, yeah, I can believe it. I've done over 500 Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., so yeah.
300 of these. How many of live chat? Yeah. Okay, bye, everybody.
Yeah.